All right, welcome. So this video is why your mind is blocking your progress. So I'm going to teach you why you actually feel that you're stuck on your journey, why you feel like you can't progress, and I'm going to explain why your mind is the reason that you cannot make progress, why your mind is actually blocking you from achieving your goals, from removing that bad habit that you've been struggling with for years, or starting that business that you've been struggling on for years. So this video is going to cover the mind and why it blocks you from making progress, why it blocks you from work and effort, and then how we can actually begin to overcome this and then eventually transform our mind from a state of resisting effort to chasing effort in the same way that we chase our vices and our addictions. So without further ado, let's get into why your mind needs comfort. Right? So your mind has this need for comfort that it's always trying to fulfill within every area of your life, right? And I could go over obvious examples, but I feel like you'll understand this, right? A lot of times our brain wants to go and sit on the couch. Our brain wants to go and indulge in whatever easy stimulation, right? Whether that's porn or that's junk food or that's social media, right? Scrolling on social media instead of reading a book or working. Your mind has this need for comfort, and we understand this, but it goes deeper than this as well, right? Think about when you're working, right? When you have some disciplined work in front of you, something that is difficult and effortful. What your brain does in this situation is it actually makes that system easier, right? And what do I mean by this? It creates habits so that you can automatically run through the more difficult tasks of your day in order to save and conserve energy. Right? And when the brain doesn't have a system like this for a difficult habit or an effortful habit, it does have a lot of resistance towards that habit because it takes a lot of work and a lot of energy and therefore a lot of the brain's resources in order to learn a new skill. That is why it resists and fights learning that new skill because it wants to just conserve that energy. Right? So your brain has this need for comfort that it's constantly trying to fulfill. It constantly wants to be familiar with what you're doing. So for example, I record videos pretty much every single morning. If I'm not recording multiple videos in a day, I record one video and then I start whatever other work I have for the day. So I'm pretty much recording every single morning. My brain has developed a habit of showing up, picking a script, recording the video, closing that out, and moving on to the next thing. And so that's an easy automatic habit for me, right? My brain finds familiarity within the fact that it knows the exact process for how to create a video. I go through pretty much the same process every single day. And so obviously there's always room for improvements. You're always changing things. You're always adapting to make it better. But the general system, the general process is pretty much exactly the same. I show up, I have a script that I've already written. I have, whatever else I may need to record, which is usually all here ready for me. I set up, and then as soon as I set up, I take a few minutes to get a deep breath in, just like focus, center myself, and then I go, right? That is a predictable routine for my brain. So even though the work is still effortful, it still requires energy, my brain has gotten used to the process and the system, and so it's familiar with it. And it uses less energy to go through that process now because I've developed a habit out of it, right? So your mind has this need for comfort that it's constantly trying to fulfill within all areas of life, right? It wants to just conserve energy. And this is a good thing. This isn't a bad thing, right? This isn't something we want to change, right? Our brain is constantly trying to ensure that we're not wasting energy. However, when we become caught up in the mind's desire to resist action, we ourselves begin to believe that it's painful to take action on things, that it's difficult to take action on things, that maybe we don't actually want to be doing this thing. We would rather be doing something more comfortable and easier. And so this is where we have to understand that we have to override the brain's desire to just be comfortable. Because if we allow that to happen, what is going to happen is we will basically do nothing for the rest of our lives, right? We will basically just go with what is already easy, what is already familiar, and nothing more, nothing less. And so obviously none of us really want to live like this. You wouldn't be watching a video like this if you wanted to live a mediocre average life. In order to live a unique life, in order to become someone great, in order to become successful, you have to be able to override the brain's desire to be comfortable all the time, because it will take massive amounts of effort, massive amounts of work and energy in order to change who you are right now into who you want to become. And so why does your mind block you from growing? Why doesn't your mind want you to go through this process? Your mind blocks you from growing, from becoming a better version of yourself because of the fact that it takes work, it takes effort, it takes energy, right? But in reality, we need to be constantly growing. We need to be constantly working, right? In order to improve, in order to survive in the first place, right? You won't be able to survive if you aren't constantly improving. I mean, look around at the world right now. Nothing is looking like it's going to be safe and comfortable within the next 10 to 20 years, right? And I mean, as spiritual as I am, right, God-given, we will make it through. But the thing is, it's not going to be an easy world to live in, right? It's not going to be an easy world to survive in. We need to be able to grow, to constantly adapt, to constantly evolve to our ever-changing environments in order to survive. And this has been true and consistent for humans up until the modern day, when we had this illusion of peace. But this illusion of peace is starting to be worn away. And the reality is hitting us that not everything is going to be comfortable and safe and perfect forever. And we need to be able to adapt. We need to be able to evolve if we want to maintain a state of safety, security, if we want to be able to survive through a difficult time period. I mean, again, God-given, we don't go to war, but if we ever did, how would we survive if none of us are able to adapt? If none of us are able to evolve, if none of us are able to grow from the stressors, from the stimulus of these circumstances, right? So you need to be able to overcome your mind's desire to resist change, because you need to be able to constantly change, constantly evolve. But another reason that you are in this state, another reason that your brain is resisting this change, is because you have conditioned yourself for instant gratification. You haven't conditioned your brain to look at delayed gratification. If your brain could see, right, if your brain had an understanding, awareness, it was wired for delayed gratification, right, future rewards for current effort, your brain would then chase that effort to the same degree it chases comfort. It's simply because we've conditioned our mind for easy gratification that it now no longer sees a requirement to use energy in this way. So once we take away, let's say porn, let's say social media, let's say junk food, right? Now it requires effort for us to get these same needs met. Therefore, wiring our brain to put in the effort to receive those things in the future, right? And so your mind is partially blocking you because it desires to conserve energy, but it will utilize this skill whether you are progressing or not. The reason it's blocking you from actually growing, from making progress, from putting in any effort is because it's wired for instant gratification rather. So when you try to put in effort for something that it could get the same needs met with little minimal effort, it is going to be completely dependent on the easy simulation, the easy habits, in order to get that same fulfillment, right? And so we just need to, over time, wire our brains for delayed gratification. So how do we break through the resistance barrier? How do we actually break through our mind's desire to block our progress, right? The main thing is we have to visualize, we have to envision where we're gonna go, who we're gonna become, what goals we're going to achieve, and therefore why it's worth the effort. If your brain understands why you are putting through with this pain, why you are suffering through this difficult challenge, and why you are doing so without giving up and just going back to the easy comfort that you know and love, it is easier for you to push through that resistance barrier because your mind will start to work for you instead of working against you, right? When your mind understands that this is the only way through, this is the only way back to safety, versus just, I can just go back and I can just not do it, I could just avoid it, then it will use the same energy, the same faculties that it's using to resist that work. It will start using those faculties for achievement of the goal, right? It will start to actually work for you instead of working against you. So you have to understand your why. You have to know why you're doing it. You have to be able to envision and visualize where you want to go. So therefore your brain can understand the purpose of this work, of this effort, and of this pain now. As well as every time you do feel your mind start to fight back, start to resist what you're doing, all you actually really have to do is keep your attention, keep your focus on the work. Keep your focus on the effort. Keep your focus on what you're doing, and don't listen to the brain. Meditation is a very good skill for building this ability, is just to ignore the mind. You don't have to listen to the mind, right? The mind, its resistance, it's the internal battle going on in your head is really just your brain's process of change, right? It's your brain's process of getting rid of any misaligned identities, any misaligned belief systems and patterns, and creating new ones, right? It will fight the change, but if you continuously just work through what you need to work through, the brain will adapt and you will become more skilled and better at what you're doing, and therefore it'll feel easier. And that in and of itself will remove resistance from the mind, because the mind won't be using as much energy to do so. So it's really just a matter of simply focusing your attention on what you're doing. Just stay where you are at, right? So what do you do when the mind does take over, right? When you're stuck in these thinking loops, when you're stuck thinking it's not worth it, or you don't want to do it, or you don't know why you're going to do it, or it's just not going to work out for you. When you become overwhelmed by these things, how do you overcome the mind and take back control? So you have to learn to observe your mind as a different entity than yourself, right? Yourself is really the consciousness, right? You are the awareness, you are the being that is encapsulating this human vessel, right? The brain is a unit of the human vessel to project an idea that the body then follows through on, right? So the mind projects a reality, an idea, a vision. The body acts in accordance with that vision in order to manifest it physically, right? You as the consciousness are the one who determines what mental picture is allowed to be, right? So what do we do when the mind becomes so fixated on the negative, right? So fixated on how things won't work out, or so fixated on fighting and resisting the work that we need to do? How do we overcome this? Well, once we can observe and identify the mind as a separate entity, what we can do is we can separate ourselves from its problems, right? We can separate ourselves from what it is saying to us and its resistance, right? Now, how we do this is we just observe the mind as the separate entity, right? So we observe the mind as the consciousness. We become aware of the mind, knowing that we are separate from it. You can pretend or play a little game like you are watching a movie, right? You're watching the movie of your life. Now, when you become aware of the mind and its resistance, when you become aware that it isn't you fighting or resisting the change, but rather your ego, your old identity, and just your brain in general, right? Because your brain does not want change. Once you can become aware that that is what is fighting back, and it's not you that is resisting this effort, it's not you that wants to fight and avoid the work that needs to get done, you can observe the mind and you can see why it is fighting, why it is resisting, why it is trying to stop you from doing the work. And by doing this, and by doing this from a separate entity, once you understand why, you can actually fix the problem for your brain, right? So, okay, let's say why is my brain doesn't want to do the work because it doesn't know why I want to do it, what I'm trying to achieve here, what the purpose of doing it is. The way we can fix that solution and have that need met for our brain so that therefore we can go and focus on what is important is we just write down our goals and we visualize where we want to go, right? When we have those two things in place, the brain can then understand why we're doing it. Why do we want to pursue this? Why do we want to achieve this goal? Oh, okay, I see that, I can envision that. And because it can see and envision it, it can now collapse the timeline around us, collapse reality around us, right? So when we envision something, when we see something in our mind and we see it clearly and we believe in it, right? Reality around us starts to shift as we start to shift, right? Because we shifted our internal state, the energy we put out is different, and therefore the energy we receive back becomes different. When our mind can see what we want to achieve, our actions then can align. And the last thing is using meditation to master your mind. So when we want to take back control of the mind, it is really as simple as becoming present again, becoming aware again, and redirecting our focus and just allowing our mind to reset or refixate onto what we're trying to do. Because what's happening in the mind is it's basically trying to avoid the effort by thinking about the effort and thinking about how badly it doesn't want to do the effort, do the thing, complete the task. Instead of thinking, just get out of your mind, stop thinking, become present, and direct your mental energy, direct your focus onto the thing that you're trying to do and achieve. Now with meditation, what we're doing is we're practicing the skill of getting stuck in our heads, getting stuck in thought, and then bringing our attention and our awareness back to the present moment. And so if we just apply this consistently over a long period of time, what we can do is every time we feel that resistance in our mind while we're trying to work or before we start a work task, we can just redirect and recenter our focus back onto the present moment and then therefore the task that we're trying to achieve. And with this, it becomes a lot easier to work through the challenges of the task, put in the effort that needs to be put in order to complete the task, because you're not constantly going back and forth between resistance and trying to do the work. You're in this state where you are focusing your energy, focusing your attention on just moving through the effort, moving through the task, and therefore all of the resistance that does come up within the task is much easier dissolved. It's dissolved much easier, right? So that is all I have for this video. If you want to practice the skill and apply it, meditation is going to be key, and you're also going to want to make sure that while you're working, you don't allow yourself to become stuck in your mind, stuck in thinking. You can think about it all you want after the fact, but I guarantee by the time you're done with the task, you won't be thinking negatively about the task anymore. So that is all I have for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you learned anything valuable, let me know in the comments below. I always like to see what you guys have to say about that. But that is it. So if you want to see more content like this, you could subscribe. You could also check out my Instagram and TikTok. Links are in the description. And without further ado, I'm out of here. Peace.